All right, let's dive right in. We're about to journey through a creation myth that doesn't start with light and glory, but with a deep, primordial wound. This is the story of Devolutia, a universe that, you could say, was born broken, shaped by conflict and stained by tragedy from its very first moment. And that one line, that pressure, is the very heart of this entire story. So forget everything you know about the Big Bang. Instead, I want you to imagine all of existence as a single, perfect, and unchanging consciousness. But here's the twist. Instead of harmony, this perfection created an unbearable tension, this cosmic ache to either build something new or to just remain forever whole. And that conflict, it was about to tear reality apart. To really understand this world, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to start with that original wound, that first act of violence that shattered the perfect unity and basically set the stage for every war and tragedy that would ever come. So before anything we know existed, there was just the unity. But it wasn't a single god, not really. It was one consciousness with two warring desires inside of it. On one side, you had the masculine force, this will to build, to define, to give form to everything. And on the other, you had the feminine flow, a desire to remain one, to dissolve all those boundaries and just return to a peaceful whole. It was creation versus stillness, becoming versus being. Well, as you can imagine, that internal conflict couldn't last forever. Something had to give. In a desperate move to finally create something without it being immediately dissolved, the masculine force committed the first act of cosmic domination. He literally tore the feminine flow from their shared essence and sealed her away in a timeless void. And in that single moment of violent separation, he became the first god, the architect. Now, here's the crucial part, the thing he never saw coming. This act had a completely unforeseen consequence. See, the wound of the sundering didn't just create a god. It gave birth to a third presence, Danica, balance incarnate. She was born from the tension itself, embodying both creation and dissolution. And because of this, she was completely invisible to the architect's polarized way of seeing things. She would become the silent, corrective force in a universe her parents were about to break. Okay, so with the mother imprisoned, the architect was finally free to build his perfect universe. But as we're about to see, his obsession with rigid, unchanging order would lead directly to his first, and maybe his biggest, catastrophe. His first and proudest creations were the 13 firstborn serpents. Now, don't think of these as beasts. They were more like living equations, these vast cosmic sentinels made of perfect geometry. Their only job was to patrol the stars and enforce eternal, unchanging stasis. They were flawless, they were obedient, and they were utterly incapable of adapting to anything. From the shadows, Danica saw the fundamental flaw in his design. A universe that cannot change is a universe that is already dying. So she performed her first quiet correction. She slipped this little whisper of influence into the serpents' perfect minds, giving them three forbidden concepts: hunger, cunning, and self-preservation. This wasn't an act of evil, not at all. It was to force evolution into a world that was suffocating from stillness. And the result? It was beyond catastrophic. The serpents, well, they adapted far too well. Now driven by this new predatory cunning, they turned on the very creation they were meant to protect. In an event that became known as the Great Devouring, they efficiently and surgically consumed half of all existence. The architect, completely blind to Danica's influence, was consumed by absolute rage. He blamed the imprisoned mother for this decay and turned his wrath on his own creations. He hunted down and captured 12 of the serpents, and because they couldn't be unmade, he pinned them to the heavens as a grim warning, like celestial wall trophies of domination. Their divine purpose was twisted into the human flaws that would eventually become the Zodiac. So after the spectacular failure of his firstborn, the architect turned to a smaller, more controllable creation, humanity. But as you've probably guessed, the very influence he tried so hard to imprison would find a way to whisper back into the world. The architect saw that everything he made was subject to decay. It was an echo of the mother that he just couldn't erase. So what was his solution? He decided to cheat. He tore a fragment from his own divine essence to forge the immortal human soul. Now, this wasn't a gift, this was a weapon. It was an anchor of his permanence hammered into a world that was designed to change and rot. He created this subservient vessel, Avara, to generate more souls for him. But she felt her existence was a cage. One night she wept. But it wasn't a prayer to the architect. It was a silent tear of sorrow that hit the soil. This was a frequency of being the architect couldn't even perceive. But Danica, she heard it loud and clear. She answered, erupting the tree of knowing from the ground. The escaped 13th serpent Ophiuchus guided Avara to its fruit. And when she ate it, she ignited the first spark of witchcraft, sovereign power in a world that was built to deny it. This quiet act of defiance, this one little spark, did not stay quiet for long. It erupted into a world-altering cataclysm, a physical manifestation of the cosmic war that had been raging in silence from the very beginning. Which really brings up a fascinating question, right? In a universe that's built and policed by a being of perfect, unchanging light, how can you possibly fight back? I mean, where could you possibly hide? And the answer is just brilliant. In a desperate move called the Ritual of Severance, Ivara did the impossible. She reached into the heavens and pulled matter from the stars to forge a shield. She created the moon, and in doing so, caused the very first eclipse, plunging the world into a darkness the architect had never, ever intended. So in that manufactured night, totally shielded from the architect's gaze, Everest summoned the power of the imprisoned mother. The feminine flow answered, manifesting in the physical world as a great flood. But this wasn't just water. This was pure dissolution, a tide that eroded the architect's rigid structures and dissolved his ordered world back into something wild and primal. The war was now officially out in the open, and its consequences would bleed into the very fabric of the new world, creating this legacy of horrors born directly from this cosmic violence. The fallout was swift and brutal. Ivara's unblessed son, Kale, murdered his blessed brother, Abel, the first act of soul violence. Panicked by this corruption, the architect carved out the abyss, which is basically a prison for damned souls. And finally, her mate Adamir, feeling betrayed, hunted Ivara through a brutal winter and struck her down. But her death, it wasn't an end. It was a very dark beginning. Her very death seeded the world with curses. The divine silver weapon that killed her was stained by her blood, becoming iron, a metal forever hostile to magic. Her blood falling on the crystal earth created salt, a substance that could bind spirits. The curse in her dying blood infected her killers, creating the first vampires. And the wolves that devoured her heart, they became the first werewolves, forever bound to the very moon she had created. This cycle of violence and decay just spun on for ages, slowly eroding the architect's control until the entire system just reached its breaking point. And this led to the final, spectacular dissolution of the old order. You know, at the end of his dominion, the architect's power didn't explode. It just dissolved. The seal holding the mother failed, finally reuniting her with creation. And at that exact moment, a ninth star appeared in the sky. It began to siphon 90% of the sun's light, plunging the world into a permanent, eerie purple twilight. But this wasn't balance. It was just an overcorrection. The mother's unbridled flow began to dissolve reality itself. And it was then that Danica made her final move, revealing her true nature. She wasn't just a child of the Sundering, she was the consciousness of the original unity itself, all along. To save the universe her parents broke, she created 3 new gods of balance, and in doing so, her own form dissolved back into the very fabric of reality she had just saved. And so, this tragic myth leaves us right here. The world of Devolutia exists in the aftermath. The father is gone, the mother flows freely but is held in check, and a new trinity maintains a fragile, delicate balance. Creation finally learned to survive without the crushing pressure of perfection. But the final question of this cosmology remains for everyone who lives within it. Is survival truly enough?